Hi, Reverend Robin here with a brief Interfaith sermon for this week. A belated Happy Independence Day. For me, July 4th is a personal holiday, my husband's birthday, and our fireworks are fireflies, which were spectacular on the 4th, by the way. I think a lot of people may have been ambivalent about the 4th this year. Freedom, that word next to the word America, strikes the ears strangely right now. The scars, the continued scarring that this nation suffers from its heritage as an enslaver on a mass scale has been starkly visible of late. In this pandemic, in cell phone videos of systemic police brutality, in the bullshit spouted by that guy in the White House who cozies up to authoritarians and seems to prefer the defeated Confederacy to the actual slavery-renouncing, finally, country he's supposedly the president of. Still, this is a season with much talk of freedom, talk of those famous words from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Men. White, cisgender, property-owning men. But as Martin Luther King Jr. preached, and I'm still with him, I still have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. And I hope that Joe Biden is right in writing that there's a natural expansion of our founding notion from all men are created equal to all people are created equal and should be treated equally throughout their lives. So let's talk about freedom. And let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, Holy One, that one who may go by the name of God or Spirit or love, or who may be met in silence. Amen. As I have in past sermons as an interfaith minister, I'll share readings from texts from different sacred traditions with reflections on their theme. As I was preparing to talk about that theme, freedom, from a spiritual perspective, I looked first to the Bible because it's one of my favorite sources. It contains almost 200 uses of the word free, but in the biblical context, freedom is very rarely separated from the concept of slavery. The word slave is used almost as often. The people of Israel frequently remind themselves in the Bible of their tribal narrative, being freed from slavery in Egypt with divine help and guidance. And they remind themselves that they should have humility and graciousness towards the lowly, for they were themselves slaves. And yet the Bible never goes so far as to condemn or denounce slavery, because even timeless works are products of their time. And sadly, slavery, enslavement, was a common legal human practice throughout the world until quite recently. Slaves were spoils of war, tribes enslaved other tribes, men enslaved women. People sold their children or themselves into slavery for the sake of food and shelter. The first nation to abolish slavery was France, when Louis X outlawed enslavement within its borders in 1513. The abolitionist movement didn't start until the late 1600s, led by Quakers who had broken away from the mainstream Protestantism of the time to emphasize a more personal and radical relationship between themselves and the divine. In their desire to live the teachings of Jesus Christ, they came to see enslavement as a violation of divine will. We might think that fight ended over 100 years ago, but the Saharan nation of Mauritania just made enslavement a crime in 2007. So, in order to talk about freedom, I'm going to talk a little bit first about slavery. And my first reading is excerpted from a document called the Germantown Friends Protest Against Slavery, a petition from 1688, written by Quakers in the colony of Pennsylvania. And I read, "These are the reasons why we are against the traffic of men body, as followeth. Is there any that would be done or handled in this manner, to be sold or made a slave for all the time of his life? Yea, it is worse for them which say they are Christians, for we hear that most part of such Negroes are brought hither against their will and consent, and that many of them are stolen. There is a saying that we shall do to all as we will be done ourselves, making no difference of what generation, descent, or color they are. And those who steal or rob men, and those who buy or purchase them, are they not all alike? Here is liberty of conscience, which is right and reasonable. Here ought to be likewise liberty of body, except of evildoers. But to bring men hither, or to rob and sell them against their will, we stand against it. And we who know that men must not commit adultery separate wives from their husbands and give them to others. And some sell the children of these poor creatures to other men. Ah, do consider well this thing, you who do it, if you would be done to in this manner, and if it is done according to Christianity. You do here handle men as they handle cattle, and who shall maintain this your cause or plead for it? Truly we cannot do so. Pray, what thing in the world can be done worse towards us than if men should rob or steal us away and sell us for slaves to strange countries, separating husbands from their wives and children? Therefore, we contradict and are against this traffic of men body. And we who profess that it is not lawful to steal must likewise avoid to purchase such things as are stolen, but rather help to stop this robbing and stealing. This was written 175 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. How radical. To think that treating others as we would wish to be treated, the golden rule that is found in many of the world's religions, should actually be taken seriously. That as we wish to be free, we should not take away the freedom of others. And as a species, as a nation, how far we still have to go to truly live that golden rule. So freedom is first something not to steal, not to trample. It isn't just the right to do this or that. It's the understanding of the wrong involved in taking freedom from another. It's notable that the Quakers are formally called the Religious Society of Friends. That word free, that word freedom, comes from the same root as the word friend. A friend is someone beloved, one whom we would not enslave, one with whom we feel free. When we can recognize our connectedness to one another, when we can find ourselves and know ourselves to be among friends, whose freedom we love as much as our own, we've made some progress. But are we ourselves free? Those of you who know me know that I had a mystical religious experience over 20 years ago and was surprised to find myself in a relationship with the divine and was surprised to find freedom there. At the time, I felt hemmed in, trapped. I'd been diagnosed with cancer, and my life seemed small and bound and sad. But then I saw a light, and my heart opened, and things opened up. I've thought over the last few days about what I was freed from. Fear, certainly. I was afraid of dying. And I realized in that experience that I'd be fine whether I lived or died. Now, that's a realization I can't feel now the way I did then. I'm back to fearing death, back to wearing a mask, back to washing my hands, but I know that realization to be true, that I would be fine either way. I was freed from anger, from resentment. I was freed from the feeling that the universe was out to get me. I knew myself to be loved, forgiven. I knew cancer was a diagnosis, not a punishment. I was freed from self-importance. I realized I was connected to the divine, and that the divine is connected to all things. How freeing that felt. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote a poem called Tending Two Shops, which says, "Don't run around this world looking for a hole to hide in. There are wild beasts in every cave. The only real rest comes when you're one with God. Live in the nowhere that you came from, even though you have an address here. You own two shops, and you run back and forth. Try to close the shop that's a fearful trap, getting always smaller. Keep open the shop where you're not selling fish hooks anymore. You are the free-swimming fish. Think that you're gliding out from the face of a cliff like an eagle. Spend less time with nightingales and peacocks. One is just a voice, the other just a color. Or, as Parliament Funkadelic sings, free your mind, and your ass will follow. I wish for you a week of freedom, of feeling free, of helping others to be free, of finding the freedom within yourself, and in that other address that is also your address that came before you opened up this shop. Amen.